Our first speaker is Horace. And Horace Brown is from VR. He's up in Tallahassee. He has worked at VR as a counselor. He worked first as a consultant. He specialized working with the deaf and hard of hearing customers, and then worked with post-secondary students. He serves as a liaison to the Florida State University, Tallahassee Community College, Florida A&M, and general adult customers. Oh, let's see what happened there. Sorry about that. He holds a master's degree in rehabilitation counseling, and he's a lifelong learner and mentor to new counselors. In his current role, he serves as the program administrator for general adult employment programs and services, which include self-employment, on-the-job training, pre-placement training, and inclusive post-secondary education. So before I turn it over to Horace, in my nervousness, I forgot to make some introductions. And Horace, we're going to let you share your screen. So Drew's going to let you share too. But I wanted to introduce you to the team here at FCSUA that I nervously forgot. Dr. Janice Seabrooks Blackmore is our executive director, and you can see her there. Drew Andrews is our assistant director, and he's in the middle of my screen. Claudia Bellapunto is our web developer, and she is our technical person that helps us with everything. And then we have Philip Sassy, who is our graduate assistant that works with us as well. So that is our team. And then Janice, at the end, I'll let you speak at the end, okay? So that you have final words with everybody. And I apologize for not doing that earlier. So Horace, welcome. Thank you for doing this today.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
We can.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Once again, thank you all for allowing me to be here today. Good morning to you all. It's been a while since we've all seen each other in person, so I'm glad to be here today to present on behalf of Florida's Vocational Rehabilitation, and thank you all for attending. If you don't mind, for those who are in the audience, if this is your first time, please put in the chat, let us know the school that you're currently representing so that we can make sure that we have the liaisons coordinate with you for your particular area. And if you haven't done so already, please take a moment and download the associated tools that are listed below the presentation. They'll give you some valuable information as to your contact person, the area you're located in, as well as some of the recent changes with vocational rehabilitation. As it was mentioned previously, my name is Horace Brown. I am the program administrator for our inclusive post-secondary education programs, which is for short IPSE. And what we do, in my role, I do assist our counselors in making sure that they have the tools that they need to provide assistance to those students who are attending these programs throughout the state. In today's session, I will be going over briefly what VR is for those who are familiar with our program, as well as some of those changes as I mentioned, and some of the things that VR can do in support to help those individuals who are attending IPSE programs and VR services. Okay. So as I mentioned before, with inclusive post-secondary education, or IPSE, as I would call for short, we do focus on those individuals' inclusiveness of these programs in which students can obtain post-secondary education through VR with supports to them finding employment one day. The the whole purpose of VR is employment-based. However, in order for a person to obtain employment, there may be certain factors that prevent them from doing so. Case in point, if the individual has certain skills or certain goals or aspirations as to what they want to do, that may require a degree. This is where VR steps in, and there could be some potential assistance that we can provide to help that student achieve that goal. Now, with the inclusive post-secondary education, one thing to remember that we do identify with the Higher Education Act and goals, and we do support personal growth and development of each student that comes through our program. One thing with VR is we also want to make sure that we do not just carry all of the burden, but we also work in connections with other agencies throughout the state, as well as the student, in making sure that their goal is achievable and it is something that they want to do. Case in point, we don't tend to just place someone in a particular field. We want to make sure for successful outcomes, this individual is comfortable and has all the resources they need in order to obtain employment. Now, with the inclusive post-secondary employment, we also provide guidance and counseling throughout this process so that the individual has all those skills and tools that they need. Okay, if this individual is attending school with VR, what we do is we will work with the client throughout this entire process, identifying their goals from start to finish, short-term and long-term goals, and we'll provide supports in the form of services, which could include post-secondary education, books and supplies, transportation needs, if the participant is eligible, and I'll go into more detail about this later on in our process. But also making sure that with VR, in association to the IDA, VR does not supplant services as well. So if there are general services that are supposed to be performed through the school or accommodations, we do adhere and hold those schools responsible for those things. If you need more information on that, please feel free to let me know, and I'll go into detail with that. Go into more detail with you on that. One thing I do want to give you a general overview when we'll talk about is where do we start with VR? Well, how the VR process works is it is an eligibility-based program, meaning those individuals who receive services through VR must be determined eligible. We do have a criteria in which they must meet in order for them to be determined eligible. One thing, they must have either a physical or mental disability documented. They must have a need or requirement for services based on their impediments to employment. And thirdly, we want to make sure that they require VR services in order to get started. Once we've identified that this person is eligible, we will then determine that eligibility with the client. We will discuss these terms with them. In the event that the individual does not have documentation to support their disability, then in these cases, we would request those forms, depending on if it's a physical or a mental disability. They range in terms of how long the medical records could be valid. For example, if the individual has a physical impairment, depending on what it is, we may send for a new evaluation to determine, the severity of the condition. Has it changed? Has it progressed? And so forth, to help determine that eligibility, and vice versa with the psychological evaluation for the mental. Typically, those records need to be within the last 3 years in order for us to determine or use them for the eligibility process. And another thing, if this individual is receiving Social Security benefits, in this case, then they are presumed eligible because they are receiving those benefits, whether it's SSI or SSDI. So we would just need a copy or documentation to verify that this person is receiving those benefits as well. And one of the great things about VR is the informed choice. When we talk about informed choice, we give clients the autonomy to make the decisions on their case, whether it's whatever it is that they want to do, as long as it's within the realms of being something they can do in this area. we will fully support them. We will give them the resources they need and so forth. And what I mean by that is, in some cases, and if an individual, for example, if an individual says they want to be a ski instructor, well, we're in the state of Florida. We don't typically have snow here, but North Florida may every now and then, but things like that is what I mean. It's not to deter the client from reaching their goals and aspirations, but we definitely want to make sure that the goals that they do wish to do are realistic. In the same breath, if they are willing to relocate, that could potentially be an option too. Keep in mind, VR is a state agency, which means they're everywhere across the United States. However, we are not connected by states. However, we could reach out to other potential areas or other state agencies, VRs, and let them know if a client was interested in relocating. All right. So once the eligibility is done and determined, what will happen is the client will come back in to develop a plan, what we call an IPE, which is the Individualized Plan for Employment. Once the individual or the student comes in, and keep in mind, during this entire process, depending upon the age, if the client is over the age of 18, they will have to give consent to any other individual who is in the room with them to speak either on their behalf or as a representative for them. Under the age of 18, we do have to have the consent of the representative or person who is in charge of their case or their medical records and so forth. So with the development of this IPE, this is where we identify, and particularly as it relates to our IPSI programs, we identify all the resources needed for them to obtain employment. If the individual identifies that they want to be, let's say, for example, hypothetically, if we're talking, want to be a auto mechanic, like working with cars, and let's say, for example, we know that this particular field requires some technical training or technical assistance, then we'll identify all the steps needed for this person to obtain this the certification or for the particular field. Keep in mind, when we look at this approach, we look at it holistically. So we look at all of the factors that takes place in order for this person to obtain this goal. What are their transportation barriers? Will the classes be offered virtually or in person? These are some of the things that we look into. If this person is living independently, will they be staying on campus? Will they have an aide? Depending on what type of plan that we're creating, whether it's supportive employment for the more serious, more severe cases, or is this a traditional plan with VR for those less severe but still require services? We look at all of these, and then we utilize the Career Index Plus to identify 3 goals, not just 1, but 3. In the event that this goal may not be obtainable, we still have some leverage or some things that we can fall back on to help that person reach their goals. And they could be in similar fields, just a little bit different from the original goal. The whole purpose of this is to making sure that the client does something that they want, and we're here to support them fully. And then granted, once this plan is completed, these services must be mutually agreed upon by the client as well as the counselor. Now, this next slide is a big thing with VR. One of the big changes that we had back in 2019 was our financial participation. With all cases that are all individuals who receive services through VR goes through the financial participation as a formality with VR. This helps assist us in identifying those individuals who could potentially assist in some of the services they have based on the income that they have in their household. Now, financial participation works based on the tax return of the individual receiving services. If it is a student and they're being claimed by their parents, then in this case, it will be whoever files that person as a dependent. Keep in mind of that. This is important because with financial participation, some of our services are considered to be exempt and some are non-exempt. Those are non-exempt services that will include post-secondary education. Previously, before, it was an exempt service, but this new rule has changed that. And how so, you'll see here with the financial participation inclusion map. Okay, now as you can see under table A, this is our inclusion table of how VR works in terms of determining how much the client is responsible for versus what VR will sponsor or assist with. Okay, for example, if the individual is coming to VR and is seeking assistance, and it's a household of 3, okay, and that their parents may combine on their tax returns from the previous year $50,000. We will use this chart under table A. We'll find the family size, which is 3. We'll go over to the side where you see $60,000 is the actual income inclusion allowance amount, which means if the parents made $50,000 combined, then this will exclude them because they are still underneath that income exclusion allowance in order for them to receive services. So in this case, the client is not does not have to pay anything towards the services they receive through VR. Okay. Now, in the event that the couple, will use the same example, if it's a family household size of 3, this is the dependent and the 2 parents on the tax returns. Let's say this amount was $70,000. Well, in this case, if the amount is $70,000, we'll go back to table A under family size 3, and we'll see the income exclusion allowance is $60,000. Well, we notice automatically this is equivalent to almost $10,000 over the income exclusion allowance. So then we'll go to table B, and we'll find out, we'll look at this chart under the income after the exclusion allowance to identify the amount of percentage the participant has to pay towards the services they receive. So in this case, we would go down to where it is located, the 8,500 through 10,999. So in this case, this individual will be responsible for 30% of the services they receive through VR. Keep in mind, and this only is applicable to those services that are considered to be non-exempt. As I go on in my slides, you'll see there are certain situations where or certain services, in particularly employment-based services, that are exempt services, which means those individuals, even if they have financial participation, would be exempt from having to pay for anything in a part of their case as it relates to those services. And this is just another example to give you a breakdown based on household size, and it gives you as I talked about the previous example, this is just a guidance for that. Now, what everyone is one of the common questions that I receive is, what are some of those approved services? As I mentioned before, you have your exempt services and you have your non-exempt services. So as you can see on this screen, our exempt services includes guidance and counseling, on-the-job training, pre-employment transition services, supportive employment services, and job search and placement services. So I want to go over some of these briefly with you so you can get an understanding of what these are. So with the guidance and counseling, how this works, as I mentioned before, this is any communication with the counselor, guidance, meetings with the counselors to identify services needed or required for the individual to receive their to meet their employment goal. We also have on-the-job training. This does include if this individual or student needs experience. This is where VR steps in. And for example, we do know in certain fields or areas, experience is required for this individual to obtain this employment opportunity. In some cases, with the on-the-job training, there could be potential opportunities for this individual to obtain permanent employment with these individuals that they're doing on-the-job training with. So VR will sponsor this on-the-job training, which in most cases is a paid on-the-job training where they can gain more experience. And we give the employer the opportunity to hire this individual, or if the employer thinks employment isn't feasible because they don't have the capacity right now to hire this individual, we could extend the OJT for additional training. And in those cases, hopefully something could open up for the student so that they can obtain permanent employment. or just in case if that doesn't work out, you still have something that we can put on the resume for the individual who may have not worked before. This will give them an opportunity to gain some employability skills as well. And as well, this goes in line with the pre-employment transition services as well. Some of those things, as I'm pretty sure most of you know about WIOA and those pre-employment transition services such as peer mentoring, work-based learning experience, and so forth. If you need more information on these services, please let me know. And then, of course, our supportive employment services are those are your more hands-on services for those individuals who require additional services or additional assistance to fulfill the services that they need. And then you have your job search and placement services. So once the individual has obtained their degree or the skills training that they need for employment, then we work on the employability and the employment search with the individual and assisting them in obtaining employment. For the non-exempt services, as we mentioned before, as it relates to post-secondary education, tuition, books, and supplies are considered to be non-exempt. However, in these cases, we do work with the client to kind of identify those additional resources that could help support them. In the event that they have 100% participation, we will still identify or try to assist the client in and paying for those tuition, books, and supplies through other means or resources that we have access to. Case in point, if the individual is receiving grants, non-merit grants, we do ask that they utilize these particular things to help support their college tuition, books, or supplies as an addition to VR if they're receiving services with us. A good example of this would be in the event, let's say if the client has financial participation of 50% and VR sponsors 50% of that, okay? So 50% is the max of what VR can actually provide, but the client cannot, has the participation of 50 that they have to do. Well, in these cases, we'll look at all the resources they have. Let's see if they have any grants. Let's see if they have any things that they can apply for, or the last resort, of course, we definitely do not want to put any of our clients in debt. So loans would definitely not be the first option. It will be our last option completely. And we will look at how and what ways that VR can assist these individuals in making sure that they can still obtain their goal. Maintenance and housing, if it is approved and has to be required, those are certain situations. They are subjective based on the program, where the program is located, as it relates to the individual. Case in point, a brief example: if the individual is living in the same city, and the individual is wanting to stay at home or doesn't want to stay at home. Let's say, for example, they don't want to stay at home. You have special situations where we would look into this. It's not to just say we would approve it, but we would have to know the whole situation in order to make that determination as far as what options we have with housing. Assistive technology and devices. If this individual needs accommodations, we do have a rehab technology team as well to help accommodate these individuals if they need some special devices or to help them through their studies. These are some of the things that we will look into. And keep in mind, as I mentioned before with the non-exempt, these do take in part of that financial participation. So in some cases, for assistive technology and devices, this could also include those individuals who are, let's say, are driving, for example. That would be one of the perfect examples. Say they have a vehicle and they wanted to do modifications so they can get to and from campus. This is where we would look at modifications for that vehicle. If the individual is capable of passing the evaluation and it is approved, then that's where VR could step in and provide some assistance as well. And then, of course, with the transportation, if it is determined that, this person will benefit from being on campus, going to and from campus, we'll look at some options for transportation, such as bus passes and so forth. not necessarily purchasing a vehicle, but if the person has a vehicle, reimbursement for gas and mileage, things like that would be some of the options that may be feasible for that individual through VR. And of course, if this person is hired and then an employer requires uniforms or work supplies, those are some of the things we look into as well, or if a background check or screenings are needed. Now, once we get into the two different versions of how VR works in terms of public versus private, in our case, we do have a vendor directory, which in most cases, most of the public universities are already vendors of vocational rehabilitation. However, with the private universities, we do have very few far in between. We have those private institutions that may not be currently vendors of VR. However, I do want to make it clear that how this works is that VR will pay or sponsor tuition up to the highest public rate. If it is determined that this person is financial participation is they're exempt from financial participation, this is where VR will step in and we will actually look at the public rate versus the private rate. And on my last slide, I'll give you more information on how you can identify this. So with the public rate, for example, a quick example would be if an individual, because I'm in Tallahassee, let's say they were attending FSU, and the FSU is the highest public rate for the state. Let's say their tuition per semester was $8,500, okay? That would be the maximum rate that VR will be able to sponsor as it relates to post-secondary education for that individual for that semester. Granted, now let's say if this individual is going to a private school and their tuition is $10,000, well, we know that's about $1,500 more. So VR could only pay up to that $85,000 mark. And I wanted to make sure that you guys knew that. And as always, I did leave the cost of attendance resource that is updated annually. So I will be taking questions now. If you guys have any questions for me, my contact information is here, as well as Carmen DuPoint, our supervisor, my supervisor. I also have the IPSI liaisons attending this presentation too as well. So as I mentioned before, if you put your college or university name in the chat box, we'll make sure we get you paired with those individuals in your area, because we're zoned off. There's a total of 7 areas across the state of Florida for VR offices, and we have a representative in each of those areas. So at this time, what I'll do is I'll take questions from the audience. If there are any questions, please let me know.
Yes, and you can also put those in the chat box. Horace, I do have one question. You mentioned in the slide about the work study, because many of these participants today are from high schools. How can, and they have high school college and career transition clubs. Can the high school college and transition clubs work with you guys in doing the pre-ETS activities?
Absolutely. And with those pre-ETS activities, those are individuals, they wouldn't necessarily go through the traditional route of VR services. As long as they meet the criteria for pre-ETS, they wouldn't have to go through the formal process of VR, meaning they could receive those services immediately upon, applying for VR services. So we wouldn't have to do the eligibility, the 60 days to determine them eligible and so forth. This will kind of expedite the process for them so that they can start to receive those services immediately.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else have any questions for Horace?
Well, I'm certainly, sorry, my name is Mark Roberts. I'm from Piper High School. I am certainly happy to hear about the services and the help that's available to students. I didn't realize VR did as much. So I'll certainly be in touch with you to get more information not just now, but as soon as I'm able to meet with my parents to discuss this with them. Do you have availability to uh, let me see. I'm thinking of arranging probably a session where you could speak at one of my club meetings. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. Even if it's not myself, like I mentioned before, we do have liaisons throughout the state. Depending on where you are, Mark, I'll get with you, and we can coordinate with the liaisons in your area, and we can make sure that we can do that for you. It's absolutely possible.
Well, that sounds good. I'll certainly be in touch with you on that.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, too.
We have a question from Amanda Warren. What services do Florida Public Colleges provide as a vendor? It's a multiple question. Is it different than what a community college could provide if it becomes an approved vendor?
Well, it depends. Particularly what I've seen from a state college. I can use locally. I don't think there's much of a difference. In most cases, I think the primary thing, depending on where you're located geographically, the colleges, the state colleges, tend to have more permits with different resources, such as housing, for example. Those state colleges may offer different housing departments, so they may have contracts out there, whereas to a community college may not have with in terms of assistance with housing and things of that nature. And then they have those resources in particularly. I know that, and the transportation could be potentially another avenue, but it would definitely depend on where you're located, and we could definitely look into that for you to see what that major difference is.
Yeah, this is Steve.
Okay, but do the schools not
Can you hear me?
have technology?
Yeah, hey Steve, I can hear you.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. I was thinking about some panel like that in my open house at the beginning of the school year, or maybe online or something like that, to give to my parents, because I think it's imperative, that they should, start on this process right out the gate, at the beginning of the school year, and be informed. Yeah, so I was thinking about maybe just because what I feel like a lot of them are not informed, and they need to be constantly, well, I wouldn't say reminded, but constantly informed of what's out there. Okay, and I want them to hear it enough to start acting on it, or make it just a part of their just make it common knowledge, and that's what I think one of the things we're trying to obtain, right now, to making it common knowledge, just like folks going to college right now with the regular ed. They're going to college, they know about the scholarships, they know about the grants, etc. But I really don't really get a grasp that it's a real common knowledge with our population right now.
Absolutely. And one thing I do encourage, could someone mute? I think we're getting some feedback from someone's mic. If you're unmuted, could you please mute your mic? Oh, okay. So, and one of the things that I have noticed to work, or from my experience in the field, is having an orientation each year. During this orientation, for us in particularly, with VR, we typically would go to those schools and have that orientation and let the students know what services are available, so that it does stay fresh. Because you do have a rotation in staff, you have a rotation in those individuals working in those resource offices as well. So in order for this to get the word out and to keep it out, I definitely think I recommend having an orientation and setting those up with the liaisons too as well in your area, so that this is something reoccurring. Now, one of the great things about the Check and Connect is because it's usually in June, so it gives you that opportunity to prepare for that upcoming semester and making sure that you have everything you need. And I think this could be another additional component of that to help you reach students annually on a semester basis rather than annually, but it will give you that opportunity. Are there any other questions?
No, Stephen, I don't see, Mrs. Janice, I don't see were there any other questions at this time? Let's see. Someone you mentioned a resource sheet. Can you put a link to it?
I'm trying to think.
Casey
Are they
Robertson.
referring?
Yeah.
So in the Whova app, the information that he has provided is in the Whova app. Underneath, if you go to the home page, it has a little button that says documents or additional resources on the home page. And under documents, that's where you'll find Horace's materials. You'll find all of the materials for the mid-year conference. You'll see that he has the financial participation summary of changes. His presentation is right underneath that. And then it has preparing, then you have one other one, right?
Yes.
Horace? Or,
I have the contact liaisons that I was referring to. They are located there too as well.
The IPC contact list, yes. Yes, that's all there, yes.
Thank you, Iris. Okay.
You're welcome.
I placed a link in the chat for everyone to quickly access to that. And so it's in the chat box for everyone to take a look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea Sweet has a question. Did you want to talk about the 60 and 90-day timeframes?
Yes, I can. So what she's referring to is with VR, with the eligibility process, we have timelines or time limits on each of our statuses per se. So in determining eligibility, we typically have a 60-day window to determine if someone is eligible for VR services. The reason it's 60 days is it allows us to schedule appointments if the individual does not have medical records in order for us to obtain those records to determine eligibility. So this gives us time to schedule an appointment, for them to attend the appointment, and for us to receive the report, which is why the 60-day rule is in place there. Now, the 90-day rule that she's referring to is for the IPE plan development that I mentioned in the presentation. Now, once the person is determined eligible or the individual is determined eligible, what VR does is that's when the timeline starts for 90 days. All right, we have 90 days in order to create this document or contract, as you would say, for all the services we're agreeing upon mutually, as well as the responsibilities for all parties involved, which is the counselor, the individual, and the whether the provider, that could be the school or whoever is providing the service in this case, what they're responsible for doing as well. So that gives us 90 days for us to make sure everything is complete and getting all the signatures required, which is from the counselor and the client. Once that is done, then we can initiate the services in the plan.
Okay, Bonnie Lucy has another question. I do not like to assume, however, can I assume that FSCJ's Support Services Department, who assists students with unique abilities, have VR contacts?
I'm not sure. Is that a school?
Florida State Community College in Jacksonville, I believe is what it is.
Okay.
Bonnie,
so, yes.
Is that correct? Go ahead, Horace.
It's
Okay.
Florida State College, Jacksonville. Florida State
Okay, Florida
College,
State
Jacksonville.
College. Yes, to my understanding and to my knowledge, I remember seeing Florida State College in our system. So yes, if they are a provider, if they're public, more than likely, and I do remember that school, honestly. So in those cases, those individuals are a part of the VR network, and services can be provided in conjunction with the school for services.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you so much, Horace, for presenting today. And Horace, you are on Whova, so would it be all right for other questions, if they have any other questions, that they can chat with you?
Absolutely.
If something else should come up. You also have his contact information on the Whova app, and you can use that to contact him directly through his email. I truly appreciate your time today to just kind of go over for the CCT clubs and the FPCTP institutions that are here today, to go over all these VR services and clarify particularly that financial piece. That's a very important piece. And also clarifying how the high schools can use the ITSE kind of activities, or the pre-ETS activities with students that are in their clubs. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.